The RPG screamed across the valley at 400 meters per second. Staff Sergeant Maya Torres saw the smoke trail a half second before impact. Just enough time to throw herself sideways as the lead Humvee erupted into a fireball that painted the Afghan mountainside orange. The explosion lifted her off her feet, shrapnel tearing through her right thigh like a chainsaw through butter, and she hit the rocky ground hard enough to crack ribs she didn't know she had. 60 feet away, Specialist Davis was screaming. His arm was gone below the elbow. Maya's ears rang with the high-pitched whine of traumatic deafness as PKM fire began raking the convoy from 3 elevated positions. The ambush was textbook Taliban, L-shaped kill zone, pre-positioned heavy weapons. No escape route except through a gauntlet of interlocking fire. The Korengal Valley had claimed better soldiers than the 8 Americans currently dying in the dirt. She looked down at her leg. The femur was shattered. She could see bone fragments glistening white through the torn fabric of her ACUs. Her blood was pooling in the dust, mixing with the Afghan soil that had swallowed so many before her. A normal person would have gone into shock. A normal person would have curled up and waited for death. Maya Torres was not a normal person. Her hands moved without conscious thought, muscle memory forged in classified facilities that didn't exist on any official record. She ripped her belt free and cinched a tourniquet 3 inches above the wound, pulling it tight enough to make her vision blur. Arterial bleeding stopped. 6 minutes until tissue death became irreversible. She had work to do. "Torres is hit," someone shouted. "Medic. We need a medic." But the convoy's medic, Sergeant Okonkwo, was pinned behind a second Humvee, taking fire from a DSHK heavy machine gun that was systematically turning American steel into Swiss cheese. Nobody was coming to save her. Nobody was coming to save any of them. Maya dragged herself forward on her elbows, her useless right leg trailing behind like dead weight. The pain was extraordinary, white-hot and absolute, but she compartmentalized it the way she'd been trained to do in a program that had been erased from existence 3 years ago. Pain was information. Information could be processed later. The convoy's radio operator, Corporal Bennett, was slumped against his vehicle's tire, dead. Half his face was missing, but the enslashed PRC, 117F mounted in his vehicle, was still intact, its green power light blinking steadily. Communications, that was the key. Without comms, there were 8 soldiers dying alone in the mountains. With comms, there were 8 soldiers with the entire United States military behind them. If that opening hooked you, buckle up. This story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and determination that will leave you speechless, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another mission. Now, let me show you what happened next as Maya Torres did the impossible. She reached the radio in 90 seconds, leaving a blood trail that looked like a wounded animal's last crawl. The bullets were still flying. She could hear them snapping past her head, impacting the vehicle's armor with metallic thuds that sounded like God knocking on a coffin lid. Somewhere to her left, PFC Martinez was returning fire with his M249 saw, laying down suppressive bursts that bought Maya the second she needed. The radio was dead. Not the power. The power was fine. But the antenna cable had been severed by shrapnel, the connection dangling uselessly from the mount. Standard protocol said to switch to a backup handheld. Standard protocol assumed you had one that wasn't currently buried under Corporal Bennett's corpse. Maya's fingers found the severed cable ends. Copper wire, partially intact. The damage was 3 inches from the junction, clean enough to splice if she had tools. She didn't have tools. What she had was a combat knife, a pair of steady hands, and training that the United States Army had paid $23 million to give her before deciding women had no place in special operations. She stripped the insulation with her blade, working by feel, because looking down meant taking her eyes off the PKM position that was currently trying to kill her. Copper twisted with copper. She needed something to bind a connection, electrical tape, zip ties, anything. Her own blood. Wet, conductive, visceral. Maya pressed her bleeding palm against the splice, letting the biological adhesive seal the copper strands together while she keyed the handset with her other hand. Any station, any station. This is Viper 3-2. Troops in contact, requesting immediate SACE at grid 1764328. Multiple casualties. taking heavy fire from elevated positions north and northwest. How copy? Static. Then, Viper 3-2, this is Black Hawk 6. We have two 810s inbound your position. ETA 6 minutes. Can you mark enemy positions? 6 minutes. An eternity in a firefight. But it was something. Negative on marking Black Hawk 6. We have no IR capability. We'll guide verbal. Copy Viper 3-2. Stand by. Navy SEAL Senior Chief Petty Officer Jake Reeves was 400 meters east of the ambush when the first RPG hit. He'd been conducting a solo recon of a suspected weapons cache. Technically outside his operational area. Technically none of his business. But Jake had learned long ago that technicalities got people killed, and something about the intelligence on this sector had been bothering him for days. Now he understood why. The Taliban had been waiting, not for his SEAL team, but for the logistics convoy that had been using this route for the past 3 weeks. Predictability was death in Afghanistan, and someone had gotten comfortable. Jake moved through the rocks like a ghost, his Mk-18 CQBR tucked tight against his shoulder. He could see the ambush playing out below. 3 PKM positions, at least 15 fighters, and 1 GSHK that was turning the American vehicles into scrap metal. Standard Doctrine said one man couldn't change this fight. Standard Doctrine didn't know Jake Reeves. He took the DSHK first. 1 shot, 340 meters. The gunner's head snapped back, and the heavy weapon went silent. Jake was already moving to his secondary position before the body hit the ground, a technique called shoot and scoot that had kept him alive through 4 deployments. Down in the kill zone, something unexpected was happening. A woman in blood-soaked ACUs was crawling toward the convoy's disabled radio vehicle. Her right leg was clearly destroyed. Jake could see the dark arterial spray even from this distance, but she was moving with a purpose that didn't match her logistics patch. He watched through his Trigicon scope as she reached the radio, did something with the antenna that he couldn't quite see, and then keyed the handset. Comms. She'd gotten comms. That single action probably just saved every life in that convoy. But it was what happened next that made Jake Reeves stop breathing. The nearest PKM position adjusted fire, zeroing in on the woman's location. Bullets sparked off the Humvee's armor, walking closer to her position with each burst. She should have stayed down. She should have played dead. Any sensible soldier would have made themselves as small as possible and prayed for the 810s to arrive. Instead, she pushed herself upright on one knee, her shattered leg dragging uselessly, and raised her M4 carbine. 3 shots. Control pairs with a single follow-up. From 220 meters, with shattered femur and no stable shooting platform, Staff Sergeant Maya Torres put all 3 rounds into the PKM gunner's chest. The weapon went silent. Her technique was flawless. Sight alignment, trigger control, recoil management. Jake had seen Tier 1 operators with worse fundamentals. Who the hell was this woman? She dropped back behind cover as return fire intensified, but Jake had seen enough. This wasn't a logistics officer. This wasn't a desk jockey caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. This woman moved like an operator, shot like an operator, thought like an operator. He made a decision. Jake keyed his own radio, switching to the frequency he'd heard her transmit on. Viper 3-2, this is Ghost Actual. I'm on your east ridge. Engaging targets. Adjust your fire left. I'm taking the right side positions. A pause. Then her voice came back, steady despite the chaos. Copy, Ghost Actual. Shifting fire left. We have 2 friendlies behind the second vehicle, 1 behind the third. All others are hostile, or WIA. Clear, concise tactical communication. No panic. No questions about who he was, or why he was there. Just immediate adaptation to a changing battlefield. Jake had worked with special operations teams who communicated worse than this supposed logistics officer. He engaged the second PKM position, 2 shots, 2 kills. While below him, the woman's M4 barked in measured cadence. She was directing the surviving soldiers now, her voice carrying across the kill zone with an authority that shouldn't have been possible from someone bleeding out in the dirt. Martinez, shift right. Cover that rock formation. Bennett's M249 is still functional. Kowalski, grab it and establish suppressive fire on the north ridge. The soldiers responded instantly. Not because they outranked her. Most of them did. But because her voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone who had done this before. Many times. In places that didn't officially exist. Jake took out the third PKM position just as the A-10 Warthogs appeared over the eastern mountains. Their GAU, 8 Avengers, opened up with the distinctive BRRT that had been sending Taliban to hell since 2001, and within 90 seconds, the remaining enemy fighters were either dead or fleeing into the mountains. The ambush was over. 8 Americans had been in that convoy. 2 were dead. 2 more were critical. But 4 would survive because a logistics officer with shattered femur had done the impossible. Jake began moving down the slope toward the carnage. He found her unconscious behind a radio vehicle, her tourniquet finally failing as blood pooled beneath her motionless body. Jake's combat medical training kicked in immediately. Fresh tourniquet applied high and tight. Hemostatic gauze packed into the wound, for a line established with lactated ringers to combat the shock that should have killed her 10 minutes ago. Her vitals were weak. Heart rate 140, blood pressure crashing, skin cold and clammy. She'd lost at least 3 pints, maybe 4. Any other soldier would have passed out from the pain alone, never mind the blood loss. But she kept fighting, kept thinking, kept saving lives. Medevac is 2 mics out, someone reported. Jake looked at the woman's face. Mid-20s, maybe 28. Hispanic features, dark hair matted with blood and dust. Her name tape said Torres. Her branch tape said Army. Her skill set said something else entirely. He pulled her dog tags from beneath her body armor. Staff Sergeant Maya Torres. 92A, automated logistical specialist. Blood typo positive. No religious preference. Logistics. She was supposedly a supply chain specialist, the kind of soldier who tracked spare parts and inventory systems, who made sure the right equipment got to the right unit at the right time. Important work. Absolutely vital to military operations. But nothing in that MOS explained how she just turned a catastrophic ambush into a survivable engagement. The Black Hawk appeared over the ridge, its rotor wash kicking up a sandstorm of debris. Jake lifted Maya's limp body and carried her to the helicopter, laying her on the casualty litter with a gentleness that surprised even himself. He'd seen hundreds of wounded soldiers in his career. He'd saved some, lost others. But something about this one was different. "Hey," he said to the flight medic, "what's her status? She gonna make it?" The medic was already working, cutting away her uniform to expose the full extent of her injuries. Shrapnel wounds across her torso, the destroyed femur, possible internal bleeding. It didn't look good. "Touch and go," the medic said. "She's lost a lot of blood, but she's fighting, I'll give her that." Fighting. Yeah, that was one way to describe what he'd witnessed. Jake stepped back as the Black Hawk lifted off, watching it disappear toward Bagram and the surgical team that would determine whether Maya Torres lived or died. He should have headed back to his own team, debriefed the engagement, filed his after-action report. Instead, he stood in the bloody dirt and replayed every moment of the firefight in his mind. The way she'd moved, the way she'd shot, the way she'd communicated, the way she'd spliced that radio cable with nothing but a knife and her own blood. None of it made sense. Unless Jake pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. A contact at SOCOM's J2 Intelligence Directorate who owed him several favors. "I need you to run someone for me," he said. "Staff Sergeant Maya Torres. Army Logistics. Something doesn't add up, and I want to know what I'm looking at." "Define doesn't add up." She shot better than most snipers I know. Took out a PKM gunner at 200 meters with shattered femur. And she field expedient spliced a severed radio antenna under fire using techniques I've only seen in, he paused, in places I can't talk about on an unsecured line. Silence on the other end. Then, give me 6 hours. And Jake, whatever you're poking at, it's going to poke back. The line went dead. Maya woke up 3 days later in the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, her right leg encased in an external fixator that looked like something out of a medieval torture chamber. The surgery had lasted 14 hours. They'd rebuilt her femur with titanium rods, removed 37 separate pieces of shrapnel from her body, and somehow managed to save a leg that any other surgeon would have amputated. She was alive. She was aware. and she immediately understood that her carefully constructed cover was completely destroyed. A man was sitting in the chair beside her bed. Navy, Senior Chief Insignia. The look in his eyes said he'd already figured out more than she wanted him to know. Staff Sergeant Torres, he said. I'm Senior Chief Jake Reeves. SEAL Team 4. I was on that ridge when you got hit. Maya's throat was dry. Her voice came out as a croak. You took out the DSHK. I did. Watched you take out that PCAM from 220 meters with shattered leg. He leaned forward. That's not a logistics shot, Staff Sergeant. That's an operator shot. She said nothing. Couldn't say anything. Not without authorization she'd never received from a program that no longer existed. Jake continued. I made some calls, asked some questions. You know what I found? He held up a manila folder. Nothing. Your file is remarkably clean. Basic training at Fort Jackson. AIT at Fort Lee. 3 deployments. All logistic support. No combat schools. No advanced weapons training. No sniper certification. That's because I'm a logistics specialist, Maya said carefully. I got lucky. Lucky. Jake almost laughed. Staff Sergeant, I've been doing this for 16 years. I've seen lucky. I've seen desperate. I've seen untrained soldiers rise to the occasion under fire. What I saw you do, that wasn't any of those things. That was training. Deep, extensive professional training. Maya's heart rate spiked on the monitor beside her bed. The machine's beeping intensified, drawing a concerned look from a nurse at the station outside. Jake noticed. Relax. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here because 6 soldiers survived an ambush they shouldn't have survived, and I want to understand how. I told you. If you say lucky again, I'm going to get irritated. Jake set the folder down. I found nothing in your official record, but I have friends in unusual places, and those friends found something that isn't supposed to exist. A program designation. Project Athena. Ring any bells? The blood drained from Maya's face. Yeah, Jake said softly. I thought so. That's classified. That's a race. There's a difference. Classified means it exists and you're not supposed to talk about it. Erase means someone went through considerable effort to pretend it never happened. He paused. 30 women. 2 years of training to special operation standards. And then someone pulled the plug and scattered all of you to conventional units where you'd never get a chance to use what you learned. Maya stared at the ceiling. Her jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. Why? Jake asked, why bury something like that? Politics. The word came out bitter. The Secretary of Defense changed. The new guy didn't believe women belonged in combat roles, so they shut it down before it could prove them wrong. She finally looked at him. 30 women trained to be the best, and they turned us into paper pushers because someone in Washington was afraid of what it might mean if we succeeded. Jake absorbed this silently. Then, what did they train you for? Specifically, everything. Weapons, tactics, demolitions, communications, survival, medicine, languages. Maya's voice cracked slightly. We were supposed to be the first female Special Operations Task Force, capable of operating in environments where male operators couldn't go, infiltrating women-only spaces in Islamic countries, building rapport with female populations, executing sensitive missions that required a different approach. And instead they gave us logistics patches and told us to forget everything we learned. She looked at her ruined leg. I spent 3 years pretending to be something I wasn't. And now look at me. Finally got to use my training, and it cost me everything. Jake stood up. Not everything. Not yet. He pulled a document from his folder and placed it on her bed. Maya picked it up with trembling hands. It was a medical evaluation form, the preliminary assessment from her surgery. Your femur is reconstructible, Jake said. The doctors give you an 80% chance of walking normally within a year. But walking normally isn't the same as passing a combat fitness evaluation. They're going to medically retire you, send you home with a Purple Heart and a disability check. I know. Unless... Maya looked up. Unless what? There's a new JSOC task force being formed. Mixed gender, special operations capable. The kind of unit Project Athena was supposed to create. They're looking for qualified personnel, people with unconventional backgrounds and proven combat capability. Jake pointed to the paper. You have 6 weeks before the medical board makes their final determination. 6 weeks to prove you can still perform at operator level. If you pass their fitness evaluation, I can get your name in front of the right people. 6 weeks. Maya almost laughed. I can't even feel my leg right now. 6 weeks isn't enough time to... 6 weeks is exactly enough time, Jake said. If you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. If you're willing to let me help you. Why? Why would you help me? Jake picked up his folder and moved toward the door. Because I've seen what you can do, Staff Sergeant Torres. And I'll be damned if I let someone bury that twice. The rehabilitation ward at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center was where military careers went to die. Maya had been there for 2 weeks, surrounded by soldiers in various stages of recovery. Missing limbs, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord damage. The physical therapy sessions were brutal. The psychological evaluations even worse. Everyone wanted to know how she was coping. Nobody wanted to hear the truth, that she wasn't interested in coping. She was interested in fighting. Jake Reeves arrived on day 15. He wasn't alone. 3 men followed him into Maya's room, all carrying themselves with a distinctive bearing of special operations veterans. Hard eyes, quiet confidence, the kind of muscle that came from functional training rather than gym mirrors. Staff Sergeant Torres, Jake said, meet your training team. Mike Thornton, former Delta Force. Eric Vasquez, SEAL Team 6. And Danny Kim, Marine Raiders. Between the 4 of us, we got 67 years of special operations experience. Maya stared at them. You're kidding. Do I look like I'm kidding? You're telling me 3 Tier 1 operators just decided to spend their time training a broken logistics sergeant? Mike Thornton stepped forward. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, but built like a tank. We're here because Jake said you're worth it. And Jake doesn't say that about many people. I don't even know if I can walk yet. Then we start there. Eric Vasquez moved to her bedside. Can you feel your leg? Sometimes. Mostly it just hurts. Good. Pain means the nerves are working. He looked at Jake. She's at 6 weeks? 42 days. The JSOC evaluation is scheduled for May 15th at Fort Bragg. She needs to complete a modified Special Forces assessment and selection course, 12-mile ruck march, obstacle course, water survival, stress shooting, and a psychological evaluation. Danny Kim whistled. That's aggressive, even for someone who isn't working with a rebuilt femur. That's why we're here. Maya looked at the 4 men standing around her bed. She dreamed of this, of being surrounded by operators who respected her abilities, who saw her as something more than a logistics specialist filling out spreadsheets. But she never expected it to happen like this. Broken, dependent, fighting just to stand up. What happens if I fail? She asked. Then you get medically retired, and we go back to our lives. Jake said, but I don't think you're going to fail. You don't know that. I know what I saw in that ambush. I know what Project Athena trained you to do. And I know you crawl 40 feet with shattered femur to fix a radio that saved 6 lives. Jake pulled up a chair and sat down. Staff Sergeant Torres, I've been in this business a long time. I've seen soldiers quit when they had every right to keep fighting. And I've seen soldiers keep fighting when they had every reason to quit. You're the second kind. The question isn't whether you can pass this evaluation. The question is whether you're willing to suffer enough to get there. Maya was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at her leg. The titanium rods visible beneath her skin. The surgical scars still fresh and angry. The muscle atrophy already setting in. Tell me what I need to do. First, we get you walking. Real walking, not physical therapy shuffles. You need to be able to bear weight on that leg within 2 weeks. Jake gestured to the team. Mike's going to handle your strength conditioning. Eric's got water work. Danny's on tactical skills. I'm coordinating everything and handling your shooting fundamentals. And the pain. We manage it, but we don't eliminate it. You need to learn to function through agony because that's exactly what the evaluation is going to demand. Maya nodded slowly. She'd signed up for this. Not explicitly, not the specific scenario, but the general concept. When she volunteered for Project Athena 3 years ago, she'd known the cost. She'd known that being good enough wasn't the same as being allowed. She'd known that doors would close, opportunities would vanish, and everything she'd worked for could be erased by someone who'd never met her. And now, somehow, a door was opening. "When do we start?" she asked. Jake smiled. "We already have." The first week was hell. Maya had thought she understood pain. She'd endured Project Athena selection course, which had pushed her harder than anything she'd experienced in conventional military training. She'd survived an ambush that had killed better soldiers. She'd crawled through her own blood to save lives. But rehabilitation was different. This wasn't acute pain that faded with time. This was chronic, grinding, relentless agony that met her every morning and followed her to bed every night. Her legs screamed with every step. Her muscles, atrophied from weeks of immobility, burned with the slightest exertion. Her bones, rebuilt with titanium and surgical precision, ached like they were trying to reject the foreign material inside them. Mike Thornton showed no mercy. "Again," he said, as Maya collapsed at the end of the parallel bars for the 6th time that morning. "You made it 20 feet. I need 30. I can't." "Wrong word. Try again." Maya gripped the bars and pulled herself upright. Her right leg shook violently, barely able to support her weight. The physical therapist had told her not to push this hard, had warned about rangery, about setbacks, about the long-term damage she might be causing. She'd ignored them. 21 feet, 22, 23. Her vision blurred. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. 26, 27, 28. She went down hard, her knee buckling, her body crashing the mat with a force that knocked the wind out of her. Mike was there immediately, checking for signs of actual injury versus simple exhaustion. "That was 28, he said. "2 more than last time. We'll hit 30 by tomorrow." "How do you know?" "Because I've trained a lot of broken soldiers, staff sergeant, and you're not as broken as you think you are." The afternoons belonged to Eric Vasquez and water work. Swimming was supposed to be easier on her leg. The buoyancy reduced stress on the healing femur. But Eric had different ideas about what swimming meant. He pushed her through underwater breath holds, treading water with weights, and combat swimmer strokes that left her gasping for air at the end of each session. "Special operations isn't about being comfortable," he told her one day, as she clung to the pool edge, her lungs burning. "It's about performing when your body is telling you to quit. That voice in your head that says you can't do any more, that's your enemy. We're going to kill that voice. And if it kills me first," Eric smiled, "then we'll know we pushed hard enough." The evenings were tactical sessions with Danny Kim, weapons manipulation, room clearing, communication protocols. Maya's shooting skills hadn't atrophied. If anything, they'd sharpened. Her hands remembered what her body had temporarily forgotten. She could still hit targets at 200 meters, still transition smoothly between primary and secondary weapons, still clear a room with the precision that Project Athena had burned into her neural pathways. But shooting from a standing position was one thing. Shooting while moving with a damaged leg was something else entirely. "You're compensating," Danny observed, watching her hobble through a shoot house. "Favoring your left side. That's fine for now, but it's going to get you killed when the pressure is on." "What do you want me to do?" "My leg doesn't work." "Make it work. Or figure out how to fight without it." Danny tossed her a support brace. "Operators adapt. That's the job. You got dealt a bad hand, so change the game." Maya strapped on the brace and ran the course again. Then again. Then again. Each iteration was slightly faster, slightly more controlled. By the end of the session, she'd cut her time by 15 seconds, and her accuracy had improved by 12%. Progress. Slow, painful, excruciating progress. But progress nonetheless. Jake came to her room on day 18. It was late, past midnight, and Maya was lying awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she was kidding herself. The evaluation was less than 4 weeks away. She could barely walk 100 feet without collapsing. How was she supposed to ruck 12 miles with a 45-pound pack? "Can't sleep?" Jake asked from the doorway. "Just thinking." He pulled up a chair. "About?" about whether this is possible, about whether I'm wasting everyone's time. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, tell me about Project Athena. Not the tactical stuff, the personal stuff. Why did you volunteer? Maya closed her eyes. Because I was tired of being told what I couldn't do. My whole life, people looked at me and saw a girl, then a woman, then a soldier who wasn't quite soldier enough. I wanted to prove them wrong. Did you? For 2 years, yeah, we were the best class they'd ever trained. Not the best female class. The best class, period. We outperformed male candidates in navigation, endurance, stress tolerance. We had lower attrition rates and higher qualification scores. We were everything they said women couldn't be. And then some politician decided we were a problem. Too successful. Too threatening to the status quo. Maya's voice hardened. They called it forced restructuring. They called it budget constraints. But we all knew what it really was. They were afraid of what we represented. Jake nodded slowly. 30 women trained to special operations standards. What happened to the others? Scattered. Most of them got out, took their skills to the private sector, became security consultants, started families. A few tried to stay in, like me, hoping things would change. She laughed bitterly. Things didn't change. Until now. Maya looked at him. What do you mean? This JSOC task force, it's not just about you, Staff Sergeant. It's about proving a concept. If you get through this evaluation, if you demonstrate that Project Athena wasn't a waste, they might consider standing up a new program, bringing back the women who were scattered, giving them the careers they earned. You think that's possible? I think nothing's possible until someone proves it is. And right now, you're the only one in a position to prove it. The weight of that settled on Maya's shoulders like a physical burden. It wasn't just her career on the line. It was the careers of 29 other women who'd been cheated out of their futures. It was the next generation of female operators who might never get a chance if she failed. No pressure, she said dryly. Jake smiled. Pressure's what you're built for. He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn notebook. I brought you something. It's the training log from my first year in the teams. Every workout, every failure, every time I thought I couldn't do it anymore. He handed it to her. I want you to see that even the people who make it aren't born ready. We're all built from breaking. Maya took the notebook. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, detailed accounts of brutal training sessions and moments of doubt. Jake Reeves, the senior chief who seemed unshakable, had once questioned whether he belonged. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. We got 24 days left, and tomorrow Mike's doubling your distance. I figured. Jake stood to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. The guys and I talked. We're not just doing this as a favor. We're doing this because we believe in you. Not in the program, not in the concept. In you, specifically. Don't let us down. I won't. He nodded and disappeared into the hallway. Day 23. Maya completed her first full mile on foot. It took her 47 minutes, and she collapsed twice during the attempt. Her leg felt like it was filled with shattered glass, and the physical therapists were furious that she'd attempted it without medical supervision. But she'd done it. 1 mile, the first of many. That night, surrounded by her training team in a hospital's empty cafeteria, she told them everything about Project Athena. It started in 2015, she began. SOCOM authorized a 2-year pilot program to assess the viability of female special operations forces. They selected 30 women from across all service branches, the best of the best. Physical standards identical to male operators. No accommodations, no modifications, no asterisks. Where was training conducted? Mike asked. A classified facility in North Carolina, initially, then rotation through existing special operations schools, dive, jump, SEER language, everything. We trained alongside male candidates. We were evaluated by the same standards. Completion rate? 26 of 30 graduated. 87%, higher than most male selection courses. Eric whistled. That's impressive. It was... Maya's voice dropped. And then we got orders, not to operational units. to logistics, administration, support roles. They split us up across a dozen different bases, buried our records, and told us to forget everything we'd learned. Who made that call? The new Secretary of Defense. He'd been vocal about his opposition to women in combat roles. When he got the job, one of his first actions was to shut down programs like ours. Officially, Project Athena never existed. Unofficially, we were proof that everything he believed was wrong. Danny shook his head. And you just accepted that? What choice did we have? We were soldiers. We followed orders. Some of us hoped the policy would change, that someone would remember what we'd proven. But the years went by and nothing happened. Maya looked at her healing leg. Until that ambush, until I had to be what they trained me to be, whether anyone authorized it or not. Jake had been listening quietly. Now he spoke. The women from your class, where are they now? Like I said, most got out, but 7 are still in, scattered across different units, doing jobs that waste 90% of their training. If I can get into this task force, if I can show that Project Athena produced capable operators. She trailed off. You want to bring them back. I want to give them the chance they were promised. The cafeteria was silent. The 4 men looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. All right, Mike said finally. Then we don't just get you through this evaluation. We get you through it decisively. No question about your capability. No room for anyone to claim you barely squeak by. What does that mean? It means we push harder. The evaluation standards are one thing, the baseline requirement, but we're going to exceed those standards. We're going to make you so undeniably qualified that no one can rationalize sending you home. Eric nodded. We got 19 days. Let's see what you're really made of. The final week before the evaluation was the hardest thing Maya had ever experienced. Mike increased her ruck distances to 8 miles, then 10, then 12. She completed each one, but the pain was extraordinary, a constant, grinding agony that made every step feel like walking on knife blades. Her rebuilt femur held, but the surrounding muscles were pushed to their absolute limits. Eric's water sessions became genuine survival exercises. He'd throw her into the pool with her hands bound, forcing her to escape using only her legs, including the damaged one. She drowned twice in those sessions, pulled from the water gasping and coughing, only to be thrown back in moments later. Danny's tactical training accelerated into full-scale scenarios. She cleared buildings with live fire, engaged multiple targets while moving over uneven terrain, executed stress drills that push her heart rate to 180 beats per minute. Through it all, her shooting remained flawless. Whatever else the ambush had taken from her, it hadn't touched her hands. Jake oversaw everything, adjusting the training when she pushed too hard, pushing back when she didn't push hard enough. He was her coach, her therapist, her drill instructor, and something else she didn't have a name for yet, something that felt dangerous to examine too closely. You're ready, he told her the night before she was scheduled to leave for Fort Bragg. Not because you've healed, you haven't, but because you've learned to fight hurt. That's what operators do. What if I fail? Then you fail, and we figure out what comes next. He paused. But you're not going to fail. You keep saying that. Because I keep believing it. Maya looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since they'd met. He was strong and disciplined, everything she'd expected from a SEAL senior chief. But there was something else there too, a vulnerability he kept carefully hidden, a belief in second chances that seemed deeply personal. Why does this matter so much to you? She asked. And don't tell me it's because you saw me fight. There's something else. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, I had a sister, younger. She wanted to be a pilot. Fighter jets, the whole thing. She was good enough, better than good. But the regulations at the time said women couldn't fly combat missions. So she became a transport pilot instead. Flew C-130s in Afghanistan. What happened? She was shot down over Helmand province. 2012. No fighter escort, no combat training, no chance to fight back. She never got to be what she was capable of being because someone decided she didn't belong. Maya felt the weight of that confession settle over them both. I can't bring her back, Jake said, but I can make sure someone else doesn't have their chance taken away. That's what this is about. Jake, get some sleep. You've got a long day tomorrow. He left before she could respond. Fort Bragg's JSOC evaluation course was everything Maya had been warned about and worse. The assessment began at 0430 with a psychological evaluation that lasted 3 hours. A panel of psychologists and intelligence officers probe her mental state, her motivations, her fears, her breaking points. They asked about the ambush. They asked about her leg. They asked whether she felt she had something to prove. Everyone has something to prove, Maya answered. The question is whether you let that drive you or drown you. They seemed satisfied with that answer. The physical assessment started at 0800. First event, the 12-mile ruck march, 45-pound pack. Maximum time, 3 hours and 30 minutes. The route wound through North Carolina's hill country, with elevation changes that turned every mile into a vertical challenge. Maya's leg was screaming before the first mile was complete. She ignored it. She'd spent 6 weeks learning to ignore it. The pain was background noise now, a constant companion that she'd accepted rather than fought. Each step was agony. Each step was progress. Mile 2, Mile 3, Mile 4. Other candidates surrounded her, mostly men, all watching the woman with the rebuilt femur, as if waiting for her to collapse. Some with skepticism, some with something that looked almost like hope. Mile 5, Mile 6, Mile 7. Her pace was steady, not fast, but relentless. She didn't slow down when the hills got steeper. She didn't speed up when they leveled out. Consistency was the key. Energy management. Mike's voice in her head. It's not a sprint. It's a war of attrition. Win by surviving. Mile 8, Mile 9, Mile 10. The pain intensified. Her femur was sending emergency signals up her spine, demanding that she stop, rest, give up. The titanium rods shifted slightly with each step. She could feel them grinding against the healing bone. This was the moment where most people broke. Maya kept walking. Mile 11. She could see the finish line now, a checkpoint marked with flags and evaluators holding clipboards. Other candidates were finishing, some with time to spare, others barely making the cutoff. She was going to make it. She was actually going to make it. And then her leg gave out. The failure was complete and instantaneous. One moment she was walking. The next she was on the ground. Her right leg twisted beneath her at an angle that sent white-hot bolts of agony through her entire body. The femur hadn't broken again. She'd know if it had. But something had shifted. Something had given way. Something had finally reached its absolute limit. 50 feet from the finish line. 50 feet from everything she'd worked for. Medical, someone shouted. We got a candidate down. Maya heard footsteps approaching, heard voices discussing whether to pull her from the course, heard the sympathetic murmurs of evaluators who'd already decided she was done. She'd come so far. She'd fought so hard. And now, with the goal literally in sight, her body had betrayed her. But Maya Torres hadn't survived an ambush by giving up. She hadn't spent 6 weeks in brutal rehabilitation by accepting limitations. And she wasn't going to let 50 feet of North Carolina dirt end her career. She began to crawl. Staff Sergeant Torres, you need to stop, an evaluator said. Medical is on its way. Maya ignored him. Her elbows dug into the dirt. Her hands grasped at rocks and roots. Her useless leg dragged behind her like a dead weight. Every inch was torture. Every inch was progress. Torres, I'm ordering you to stop. No. The word came out through gritted teeth, barely audible. No. 45 feet, 40 feet, 35 feet. Other candidates had stopped to watch. The men who'd been skeptical, the men who doubted, the men who'd waited for her to fail. They were all watching now, and their expressions were changing. 30 feet, 25 feet, 20 feet. The pain was indescribable. Her entire body was screaming. Her vision was blurring. Her arms were shaking with exhaustion, but she kept moving, kept crawling, kept refusing to quit. 15 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet. Her hand crossed the finish line, then her elbow, then her shoulder, then her chest. And finally, with one last desperate pull, her entire body cleared the checkpoint. The timer stopped. 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 43 seconds. 2 minutes under the cutoff. Maya lay in the dirt, gasping for breath, staring at the sky. She heard someone say she made it. She heard someone else say, "Did you see that?" She heard the clicks of cameras and the scratch of pencils on clipboards. And then she heard Jake's voice, closer than she expected. "I told you so." She couldn't lift her head to look at him, but she felt his hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "You crazy, beautiful, stubborn woman," he said quietly. "You actually did it." The medical evaluation that followed confirmed what Maya already knew. She'd pushed her leg past its limits. The femur hadn't re-broken, but she'd torn ligaments and strained muscles that would require additional weeks of recovery. She wouldn't be doing any more physical assessments for at least a month, but she completed enough. The evaluation panel met that evening to review all candidates. Maya wasn't present. She was in an infirmary, her leg elevated, her body pumped full of painkillers that barely touched the agony. But Jake was there as an observer when the decision was announced. Staff Sergeant Maya Torres. The panel chairman read from his notes. Psychological evaluation, exceptional. Tactical evaluation, exceptional. Physical evaluation, completed within standards, though candidate required medical attention after the ruck march. Medical concerns have been noted, but do not disqualify candidate from further consideration. A pause. After careful review, this panel recommends Staff Sergeant Torres for acceptance into Task Force Minerva. Her demonstrated skills, combat experience, and determination under adversity make her an ideal candidate for this unit's mission requirements. Jake allowed himself a small smile. She'd done it, against all odds, against her own broken body, against a system that had tried twice to bury her abilities. She'd done it. He found her in the infirmary 20 minutes later, still half awake from the medications, tears streaming down her face. "I heard," she whispered. "They told me. I'm in. You're in. Jake." She reached for his hand. "I couldn't have done this without you. Without all of you." "Yes, you could have. We just made it faster." Maya laughed. A real laugh. The first he'd heard from her in weeks. "That's not true, and you know it." "Maybe." He sat on the edge of her bed. "But it doesn't matter now. What matters is what happens next. You've got a few weeks of recovery. Then you report to Task Force Minerva for the next phase. This is just the beginning." "The beginning," Maya repeated. 3 years ago, I thought my career was over. I thought everything I'd trained for was wasted. And now you get to be what you were always meant to be." She squeezed his hand. "What about us?" The question hung in the air. They both felt it. The connection that had developed over weeks of training, of shared vulnerability, of late-night conversations about loss and hope. But they were soldiers. They had missions. They had responsibilities that didn't leave room for complications. "I ship out in 2 weeks," Jake said. "Back to Syria for a 6-month rotation. You'll be with Minerva, wherever they send you. That's not exactly conducive to whatever this is." "Yeah." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, 6 months. That's not forever. "No, it's not. So we wait. We do our jobs. We serve our country. And when we're both back on American soil, with time and space to figure this out." She met his eyes. "We figure out." Jake felt something loosen in his chest. Something he hadn't realized had been tight. "That sounds like a plan." "It's not a plan. It's a promise." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gently, carefully, with all the things he couldn't say out loud. She closed her eyes and let herself feel, for just a moment, something other than pain. "Get some rest," he said. "You got a lot of healing to do." "So, do you?" He paused at the door, looking back at her one last time. The woman who'd crawled 50 feet with a useless leg. The woman who'd survived an ambush and refused to quit. The woman who'd proven that Project Athena had never been a waste. "Maya." "Yeah." "The guys, Mike, Eric, Danny, they wanted me to tell you something." "What?" "They said they've trained a lot of operators over the years. A lot of tough men who thought they knew what sacrifice meant. And every single one of them would have quit at mile 11. He smiled. "You're the real deal, Staff Sergeant Torres. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. The door closed behind him. Maya lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the base settling into night. Somewhere out there, 29 other women were living lives that didn't match their capabilities, buried by politics, silenced by fear, waiting for something to change. Tomorrow, she'd start making calls. Tomorrow, she'd begin the work of bringing them home. But tonight, she let herself rest. She'd earned that much. Outside the infirmary window, the first light of dawn was breaking over Fort Bragg, orange and gold and full of promise. A new day, a new chapter, a new beginning for everything Project Athena was supposed to be. Staff Sergeant Maya Torres closed her eyes and smiled. She was wounded. She was exhausted, but she was no longer broken. She was exactly who she'd always been meant to be, and this was only the start.